Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Soul Food on the first Wednesday of the month. I hope you're having a great month so far. So far. And we hope, in our case, that it's better than September and that we get internet lines back up around Redmond and all that fun stuff. In any case, the first Wednesday of the month, we have Rick Levine and Jeff Gower here for Astrology Night, and they are the wisest seers on the planet, and they're going to be first. Good evening and welcome to Astrology Night, the first Wednesday night of every month here in Redmond, Washington at Soul Food Coffee House. I'm Rick Levine.
And I'm Jeff Jower, and we will be spending much of the evening, much of the next hour with you, talking about the astrological patterns for the month of October.
And what we normally do is we spend about 45 minutes to an hour talking about what we like to call the cosmic weather. If it's raining out, we all get affected by the rain, but some people like the rain, and especially the ducks. And some people, especially with suntan oil in their hands, might not. And so the weather affects us differently, and we will be talking in the first hour about the cosmic weather for the upcoming month. We'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll look at a few charts. If you're interested in having your chart looked at, put your birth date, place, and time on a piece of paper along with your name. Put your email address there also so we can stay in touch with you. Put it on the table where Julie is sitting. Thank you, Julie, for taping. And we will look at three charts after the break and talk about how this cosmic weather is brought down to individual lives.
Now, some of you in the audience here tonight, or some of the thousands of you who've been watching these videos every month, know that Rick and I have for about 3 years been doing a daily Planet Pulse audio forecast. It's basically an overview of each day from an astrological perspective. The audio forecasts have the video forecasts have run their course. You can still get a daily audio update from Rick and me at stariq.com. That's S-T-A-R dot... I'm having enough night.
S-T-A-R-I-Q. Jeff used to know how to spell.
I used to know how to talk, but...
S-T-A-R-I-Q, stariq.com.
And there's a listen button on the top right corner of the page. Go there, and you'll get about 2 to 3 minutes a day about what sign the moon is in, what the significant astrological patterns are for the day. Now, Rick and I are also providing individualized astrology in a couple of ways. One is that we each do private consultations. You can reach Rick Levine at rlevine@stariq.com, and you can reach me at jjower, J-J-A-W-E-R, at stariq.com.
How come you spelled your name and didn't spell my name?
Everybody knows how to spell Levine, except me. And every year, Rick and I do a retreat at Brighton Bush Hot Springs shortly after the New Year. This is an incredible place in the old-growth forests and the Cascades in Oregon. It's a weekend. I think it's the first weekend after the first of the year. Go to Brighton Bush, BREITENBUSH.com. What we will do is Friday night we do an overview for all of 2015. And then Saturday and Sunday, we look at the individual chart of the 20 or so people who attend and talk about their astrological patterns for the year ahead. So if you'd like to join us for this very special event, go to brightonbush.com and find out more.
And this is the 7th or 8th year that we've been doing this, and it's always an extraordinary weekend because in doing the charts, like some of you who stick around for the second part where we do these charts, like these short versions, we do a little bit more in depth, and because everyone in the group has their turn, then we all get to know each other. It's really kind of a bonding kind of a thing, so it's really a very interesting event.
All right, so let's get into this month and what's going on. We've got
October of 2014.
That's it, isn't
Woo!
it? Yeah. Well, we have a couple of big features this month. Mercury retrograde that we'll be talking about, and we have 2 eclipses this month to talk about as well.
I lost track of what I was saying because there are people that are like talking over
Yeah,
us.
if you want to have a conversation, it's a big place.
Thank you. So this month is really interesting. Every month, I think we say that at the beginning of
You
every-
do. You
this
do.
is an,
You
I
say
do.
it.
This
I
is an
don't
interesting month because this is the first month in a while where I think that we have some strong reprieve from all of the noise that's been going on. We do have some eclipses. They rattle our cages a bit. But we have a grand fire trine that kind of sits throughout the month that becomes a theme that we'll come in and out of.
Yeah, so let's start by talking about that. A trine is a harmonious relationship between planets. It's an angle of 120 degrees. That's an easy flow. And right now we're just coming off of an exact harmonious trine between Jupiter, the planet of expansion, growth, optimism, and opportunity, and Uranus, the planet of innovation. So we're in a wave that represents an opportunity for all of us to have some breakthroughs for new ideas. Fire is an element of creativity. Jupiter and Uranus both represent functions of the higher mind. And the trine is a creative angle. And this party, which is underway, is going to keep going at least through the first week or so of the month.
Well, and actually it comes in and out even through next year because Jupiter, the faster moving of the planets, Jupiter and Uranus, Jupiter takes a year to move through a sign, so next spring and summer, Jupiter is back at that same point making this same aspect. But right now, the fascinating thing is that we have Mars in the third fire sign, Uranus in fire sign Aries, Jupiter in fire sign Leo, and Mars moving through fire sign Sagittarius. And you can see Mars at 12 degrees of Sagittarius is lower degree. It will reach 12, 13, 14, then 15, 16 over the next week. Do you have the actual dates there?
Yeah, Mars will form a harmonious trine exactly on the 4th. That's 3 days from now. We're already in range. And what that means is our actions with which Mars is associated in outgoing, enthusiastic, adventurous Sagittarius kick in with this supercharged planet of electricity, excitement, and innovation in the pioneering sign of Aries. Lots of juice for new things, which might also kick up a little bit of impatience and an unwillingness, perhaps, to cooperate or compromise.
And often we get these temporary, what we call moving grand trines or patterns like that. But this one is important because Jupiter and Uranus actually hold that pattern long enough for Mars, as Jeff, it really is a pattern that lasts more than a day or two or three or four. And so we are able to get the buzz off this. And this is a buzz. Grand trines, that's the equilateral triangle. It's basically a closed circuit of energy. And in ancient astrology, the grand trine was considered to be the ultimate cool thing. It was a blessing because the planets were working with each other. The downside, for us modern psychological astrologers, is that there's no friction, and it's the old workout, idea, no pain, no gain. And so sometimes these grand trines are so easy that we don't necessarily do the work that we might otherwise do. There are extenuating circumstances this month, but it's something to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point. When things are easy, sometimes we're slack. And we've got so much energy kicked up by this particular pattern that we can all be amazed by our ideas, by the possibilities for the future, by all of the creative thoughts in our heads, and just let them fly by without bringing them down to earth.
Right, and sometimes even if we try to, it's almost like we can't get traction sometimes with grand trines. I often think of grand trines as a closed-circuit television, that it's like when you have a grand trine in your birth chart, it's like it works so well that it doesn't matter what you do, what you can change your career, you can change your relationship, you can move to another city, but you get back to your room, you turn the TV on, and it's still playing the same program. It's like it's hard to shake things up.
Yeah, however, the planets There are several reasons why this grand trine is unlikely to be one of the lazier ones.
Agreed.
Because it's in fire, and fire energy, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, wants to do things, wants to take action. And each one of the planets involved is either expansive or initiating or explosive.
Right. There's another reason why. There's actually two more reasons that we'll get to. One of them is that one of the points of this trine is Uranus, which is the planet of shock and surprise and revolution and like lightning, kind of releasing tension. And Uranus, for those of you who are regulars, you know that Uranus has been involved or engaged in a 90-degree square to Pluto that began back in 2011. Thank you. Even before then, but 2011 exact, and really doesn't play on through until 2015 and even on into 2016. And Uranus Pluto, although it's 3 degrees from being exact, it's not exact now. It's exact the 7th and final time next March. But this point, one of the points on this grand triangle or grand trine, Uranus, through this month is opposed by both the Sun and Venus, which also square Pluto. Now, what this does is this sets up that old pattern of the stress and tension that has been these cultural, revolutionary, economic shifts that we've been dealing with for the past few years. Maybe are always there, but have certainly been louder recently.
Yeah, and we have talked for several years about the tense, rare right angle between revolutionary Uranus and transformational Pluto. The world has certainly reflected back to us the kind of breakdowns of institutions that this seems to represent. However, or should I say in addition, the grand trine in fire we have this month, particularly early in the month, is our opportunity to step out of the old squares, the old blocks, and the old limitations in our lives. Look, we all face things in life that limit us, and we can't control everything, and we're not free of everything. Yet, what the planets are telling us right now is that if you're willing to act differently, think differently, and let creativity lead you rather than spending your time limited by the barriers and the blockages about which we complain and about which we are frustrated, we can really make some progress, personally and collectively. When you run into your own intellectual walls, saying, I can't do that, this is always going to be a problem in my life, imagine that you had superpowers. The superpowers of imagination that allowed you to leap above and over those barriers, because somewhere between being a mortal stuck in a box and a superhero free to do everything, there's a hell of a lot of creativity that will give you more choices, more joy, and certainly more freedom.
Well said. Throughout the first part of the... then there's the third piece of why this is not just a total, relaxing, chill month where we can settle into that grand trine and not do anything. The third thing is a pair of eclipses that we'll drill down on in a few minutes. But the moon, which goes around once a month, the moon, when it comes through Aries, lines up with Uranus. It basically is an eclipse. It's a full moon eclipse, and that's on the 8th. And then 14 days later on the 20th.
Yeah, it's that day, the 20th. Well, it's funny. Rick runs all of his writing on New York time. It's the 23rd of October,
yeah,
when we have the new moon eclipse in Scorpio.
And so this full moon on the 8th and the new moon eclipse on the 23rd are basically two key points, because every lunation, every new moon and full moon is a turning point in the monthly cycle. But when the moon is eclipsed by the earth at the full moon, or when the sun is eclipsed by the shadow of the earth at a new moon, by the shadow of the moon at the new moon, when the moon comes between the sun and the earth, these are times where the energy is rattled. And we often have some, what I like to call temporal displacement, and we'll talk more about that, or Jeff will talk more about that now.
Well, what I really want to talk about first, and if Rick and I seem a little fuzzier than usual, Rick just got back a couple of hours ago, and I got back late yesterday from the International Society of Astrological Research Conference in Phoenix, Arizona.
An amazing gathering of astrologists.
Of hundreds of astrologers.
All over the world.
Playing, working in Phoenix heat and hyper air conditioning. So please bear with us. But, you know, we often start by talking about the sun sign of the month. And we do begin this month with the sun in Libra and end it with the sun of will, consciousness, and creativity in Scorpio. Now, Libra is an air sign. And air signs, like Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius, are basically objective. Air represents the capacity to step back from something and see it in a more objective or detached way. And Libra, the sign of the scale, the weighing and balancing, the seeing both sides of things, is the diplomatic master of putting its immediate impulses aside to relate, connect, compromise, and do whatever is necessary to create harmony. Now, why I'm talking about it now is I want to connect it to all of this fire energy, because air feeds fire. That is to say that if you get more breeze into a fire, you'll get that fire burning faster. That's great. But Libra has an inclination to want to get along, to be nice, to not rock the boat. It's the sign of the peacemaker. And if the great opportunity, particularly of the early half of the month, is about having these radical breakthroughs and spontaneous actions and brilliant ideas, Libra's compromising nature could undercut some of your genius and some of your will to take action. So perhaps a favorable way to connect these two things is that be a genius, be weird, think out of your mind.
That's all Uranus.
Right. Let yourself go as far as you can and even take some risks in terms of your action, but do it with respect for other people. With respect for other people, you will be not only be less disruptive in a negative way, but guess what? You might get help. That your genius idea, your breakthrough, or just your itchy, antsy desire to change patterns in a conversation with another person may gain you ideas and allies that can create something of the future, but in a way that's not particularly disruptive or destructive.
Now, Jeff described air as perspective and objectivity. The Jungian perception of the elements is also interesting. It doesn't contradict. It actually, what Jeff said, supports this. And that is, air is about intellect. It's about movement. It's about thought. That's how we get objectivity over our emotions, is by backing up from them and giving perspective and using the intellect to think rather than only to feel. So this whole Libran energy is also giving rise to thought in this process. Fire doesn't think. Fire just burns. Fire acts or responds or does what it does to stay alive. It doesn't think, well, I think I'm going to burn this first and then I'm going to burn that. It just does it.
Well, it's interesting about the word think. Yes, I think in that sense you're absolutely right. It doesn't consider, but it intuits. So
fire
is intuitive.
Absolutely, because there's a direct engagement with there's no time. Go ahead. Yeah.
Right. So something is happening on the mental level, but it's not thought in the normal sense that Rick is describing.
Well, and in some ways, it's the fire of inspiration. You know, it's the burning fire. William Blake talks about the burning fire of imagination. It's not quite just imagination, but there is a fire that happens in the brain that's different from the analysis and or weighing and balancing the Libran tendency to want to look at clouds from both sides now.
Right, which fire doesn't have to do.
No, fire will burn. It burns first, asks questions, or gets perspective later. So what's interesting here also is, and we'll run this through animation here in just a moment, but what you can already see that the sun is already pushing toward making a 90-degree angle. These lines get thicker as the aspects get tighter or more exact. But as we move this ahead, the sun will, these lines will thicken up. And you can see the interplay between this blue triangle of energy that's flowing smoothly and the red right triangle where the energy is more tense and blocked and needs to creatively express itself through some sort of dynamic resolution.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't seen this form before, basically the red lines represent angles of challenge or friction. They're very dynamic. Where the blue lines represent angles of ease and harmony. If we're all in friction, that's just tension. If we're all in harmony, that's stasis. We don't move. So the fact that the sun in logical Libra squares, makes a right angle to potent, provocative, punishing, pulverizing Pluto on the 4th of the month,
Ouch.
which can raise power struggles, in fact. Pluto has a great deal to do with power. The sun of will and consciousness in Libra wants fairness. Well, things might not feel entirely fair over the next couple of days. Or if you have been in a situation where you have been overly Libran, that's peace at any cost, overly accommodating, that square to Pluto that may start kicking in as early as tomorrow can sort of push us out of our comfort zones in a necessary way to provoke change, transformation. And then on the 7th, I believe, the sun will be exactly opposite to Uranus with the full moon eclipse the next day. So even though we're all kind of happy and breezy and talking about this lovely fire stuff, the fact is that over the next 8 days or so, we're going to see some tension that's likely to build.
We are, but again, it's a really interesting balance between these two, the blue lines that flow easily and the red lines that are a little bit tougher. And what's interesting also is as the sun comes into this direct opposition with Uranus, you see how these blue lines here thicken up too, and it makes the shape of kind of like a kite. What it does is it reinforces this at the same time, because first the sun and then Venus come to the point that's exactly halfway between Jupiter and Mars. This is the optimistic, energetic, enthusiastic energy that we talked about, maybe without using those exact words at the opening.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on when you have the hot and cold, the red and the blue in strong ways, which is really what we're headed for. It's like a party. People are laughing in one corner, people are flirting in another, people are arguing and fighting and spilling drinks in other places of the room. This is a very energetic time.
Do we get to choose between the red pill and the blue pill? That's
Absolutely.
what I want to know.
That's what Libra is. If you're nice, you get to choose. And if you are strategic enough, and
that's Libra.
That's Libra. The idea that we behave in a way not just because we feel like it, but to provoke or to stimulate a response that we're looking for. So being strategic is a way to keep our balance in the midst of these sort of buffeting winds of hot and cold.
And then on...
We just have to pause to...
technical break. Think of yourselves as a telephone call on hold. I'll get right back to you. Hold on.
Or if you leave your number with you, we can call you back automatically. Yeah, just give us your number. We'll call you back. See, we've gone to higher tech equipment, so we're less efficient, although the images are better.
Are you still there?
So, in a period of time in which we're dealing with extreme contrasts, the excitement, the rebelliousness, the sense of freedom, and the moral sense of righteousness of Jupiter and Leo as part of this grand trine, and two eclipses, there's nothing like the cooling system of Libra and the intellectual balance and the capacity to make peace with whatever happens that allows us to go through these intense times with some grace.
As many of you know, in astrology, every planet connects with a sign, and every sign connects with a planet. We have the sun in Libra doing all of those cooling and objectifying and compromising and the diplomatic strategizing that Jeff's been talking about. The planet that relates to Libra is Venus. Venus is the planet of love and beauty, and Venus connects with two different signs. In Taurus, it's about the sensual, it's about the physical aspect of love and beauty and good food and things that feel nice. In Libra, it's an air sign, so it's about the thought of beauty. It's about the idea, it's about aesthetics, it's about colors and paintings and interior design. And so we look at where the sun is in Libra, the planet of Libra is Venus, and Venus is also in Libra, moving into this same pattern, and in some ways it's intensifying it, but in other ways it's bringing another layer of that peacemaker into the situation that I think gives us some perspective or some ability to go to the Libran side rather than into the fire.
Right. The other perspective, however, is what if you're too passive? What if you're an accommodator? What if it is more important to you to have other people be calm and not upset by you than it is for you to be yourself and to express yourself? Well, it's possible, certainly in this Libra month, with both the Sun and Venus hooking up with disruptive Pluto and Uranus, is that if you've compromised too much, and you're one of those compromising kind of people, you may hit the wall. In other words, if you're overheated, you can cool. If you're overcool, you might get the heat you need to really express yourself in a way that's more authentic rather than just placating.
And because it's an eclipse, and this is the chart now of the full moon opposite the sun, the full moon lining up with explosive and independent, brilliant Uranus. The thing about eclipses or about a full moon eclipse or any opposition is that it's often projected. It's often about a relationship dynamic, which means that if I'm too passive, it might be that my partner is the one that becomes the active instigator of trouble or of change or of opening or whatever. And so there's this whole dynamic of inner and outer here that plays out, especially because the moon is how we feel, and the moon moving through Aries at the full moon eclipse is lining up with Uranus, which might make us feel like we're going to explode. Like all those things that we've been holding in, all those tensions, all those things that we haven't said, all of our anger, all of our desires, basically it's going to be like that proverbial loose cannon just ready to roll in some direction, totally out of control.
Yeah. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and it's a sign of the individual. Uranus is a planet of individuality. This eclipse is occurring on the lunar south node in individualistic Aries. And a place where that explosion may come from is the sense of being alienated. I've given, I've explained, I've done everything I could to make this relationship happen, and you still don't hear me, you don't understand me. In fact, you don't even know who I am. And that can motivate constructive behavior that frees us from unequal relationships or unsatisfying alliances, or, as Rick said, and I think this is a common way to do this, we can project it. I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm nice, but something else, someone else blew up.
Yeah. I'm nice, you're a jerk. You're a jerk. I'm in this relationship forever, but I'm in it in such a way that makes you want to get the hell out. No, I mean, this is one of the dynamics of how projection works. And on the day of the full moon eclipse, we also have Venus kind of in the mix, but very closely square Pluto, and this is about depth of feelings. And so the feelings that can come up during this eclipse may be very raw, very deep, very intense. Is this good or bad? Well, yes. Both. It's not, bringing up deep feelings is not bad. It's just how we either choose to work with them or put them into denial that creates the situation that becomes good or bad.
Yeah, Venus is about pleasing, particularly in Libra. Pluto doesn't give a crap about pleasing anyone.
What does Pluto care about?
Depth, potency, power, desire, survival, hunger. Pluto is coming from a non-social place of behavior.
Right, and if a civilization gets taken out along the way towards any of those ends, it's not Pluto's problem, doesn't care.
It's just necessary. But the positive side of Venus's square to Pluto, which will be a significant part of this month, is in recognizing the needs and desires, particularly in relationships, that we have been unable to recognize and unable to express. See, when you're really in a pacifying mode, if you're really a pacifying person, you almost deny your own needs just to get along. So saying what you need is important, but you can't say it if you're unwilling to see it. And I think this month, early in the month, we're going to become much more aware of what we get for what we give. And if that's out of balance or unsatisfying or just a bad deal, it could be with the nicest person in the world, the best job in the world for others. But if it does not satisfy your deeper desires and needs, maybe it's time to reconsider those engagements.
And as if that wasn't quite enough going on in one day, back to the Grand Trine for a moment. On that day, we also have Mars moving into an exact trine. I mean, it's been pushing for days in advance, but on that day, energetic Mars, feisty, fiery, go-getter Mars, superhero Mars, an adventuring Sagittarius, cavalier, I don't care what happens, I'm going to go to Africa on this safari. Mars, this Mars that is aiming at the top of a mountain, not caring whether he ever gets there or not, but the idea of the journey is what's important. Mars is hooking up energetically exactly with Jupiter, the planet of bigger and better and more and farther away, and it's the two of these together add not only an uplifting energy, not only an exaggerating energy, but an energy that can take us too far.
Yeah. Now, there's an astrological pattern that began on the 4th of the month, which normally would take up much of our time. And that's called Mercury retrograde.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even talked about Mercury.
No, we just forgot about it.
He's going to be pissed.
Nah, it's only Mercury. We don't care. Mercury, the planet of the lower mind, of data collection, of intellect, of logic, of communication, Mercury appears to turn backwards, called retrograde, 3 times a year for about 3 weeks at a time. This Mercury retrograde period, which starts this month on the 4th, lasts until the 25th. So before we go into the signs involved, the usual Mercury retrograde advice is this: double check details, double check important messages, be careful with technology. Mercury is associated with all of these things, and during its retrograde period of time, there tends to be a greater likelihood of being misunderstood, of missing details. But The positive side of Mercury retrograde is that when a planet's going backwards, it's revisiting territory it's already been in. Maybe you repair equipment. Maybe you reorganize a trip or a plan, or you untangle a knotty a relationship by having conversations about things that were left in incomplete or uncomfortable states.
Yeah, and both Jeff and I sometimes, I wouldn't say pass off, but there's a large community of astrologers that say, don't ever buy anything, don't sign a document, don't get married, don't buy, all these don't.
Stop breathing.
Stop
for 3
breathing,
weeks,
because if
really
you're breathing
hard.
when Mercury is retrograde, chances are it can go down the wrong pipe and end up in your stomach. Now, the fact is that we have delayed flights, missed connections, missed appointments, we mess up directions when Mercury is not retrograde. And both Jeff and I like to sometimes minimize this Mercury retrograde thing as to how it impacts us personally. But I would also like to note that the 3 largest internet outages that were totally regional, like the entire western United States, the 3 largest internet outages that have ever happened on the day that different years, but each happened on days when Mercury stopped. From Earth's point of view, it looks like a pendulum going around the sun. Mercury goes around the sun where you're out there on Earth and Mercury is going around the sun. It looks like it's going back and forth. And on the days that Mercury makes its change of direction from forward to apparently backwards, or apparently backwards to forward, those are often days when there really are hardware or software glitches that are separate somehow from the excuse of I'm traveling today and I got delayed in the airport for 4 hours.
Yeah, Rick and I did a workshop on transits together Monday in Phoenix. And one of the things that we talked about is a very fundamental astrological idea. That's slower moving planets way more. That is, when a slower moving...
Energetically.
Right, when a slower moving planet is making a contact to your birth chart, it's much more important. It's much more rare than a faster moving transit like that of the moon, for example. Now, Mercury is pretty fast moving, but when a planet changes direction from our perspective here on Earth, it slows down, appears to stop, and then slowly begins moving in the other direction. So Rick's point about the internet outages when Mercury went retrograde is not necessarily a statement about the whole Mercury retrograde cycle, but that day when it turned, it was heavy because it sits at the same point for a longer period of time. That's why it weighs more.
Now, this particular Mercury retrograde, Mercury had been moving through Libra, where the Sun and Venus are, and then it moved into Scorpio late last month. And now it's on the 4th, it turns retrograde. It will move back from Scorpio, back into the latter degrees of Libra, and then on the 24th, 5th.
Oh, when it goes direct, the 25th.
25th. On the 25th, in Libra, it will turn direct again and then move onward and resume its regular path again for the next few months. Now, what that means is that if you have planets in your birth chart that are at the last degrees of Libra or the very first degrees of Scorpio, what would normally be a once-a-year Mercury going across your sun for a few hours, all of a sudden becomes a couple of months. Because Mercury goes across the sun, or across the planet in your chart, sorry, and then it goes back across it again a few weeks later, and then it turns direct and it goes back across it again. And so this again adds the weight. It's an other than normal situation. It happens all the time, but it's not typical. And what happens is those events often that might just happen in an afternoon somehow seem to be stretched out. Some scenario that begins with the Mercury going over the point the first time, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later comes back, and somehow you're dealing with that a similar issue or the same issue, and then a few weeks later it is again. And this is one of the interesting things about astrology, is how we can see that time isn't always just a straight line.
Well said. And I think What Rick and I are trying to do is bridge the gap between a fatalistic, deterministic, old-fashioned astrology and a humanistic, liberating, modern astrology. What we're saying is, yes, during Mercury retrograde or during other challenging patterns, pay attention to the meanings, the potential challenges, but don't give up your right to act. The purpose of astrology is not to inhibit us from acting, but to help us understand the ways to use the energies that are available to us most effectively. We're not bears, so we tend not to hibernate. When Mercury is retrograde, it gives us an opportunity to go back over ideas, to reconnect with people from our past. There are many useful things that we can do, and clearly stopping life, not signing a contract, not doing anything significant over a 3-week period of time, 3 times a year, is pretty inefficient and ineffective.
Right. However, as Jeff said, there are things that we can do to make the most of this period of time. One that Jeff either said or alluded to enough to almost have said it is that because Mercury is moving back over territory it's already been at, it's taking care of things that should have been taken care of before. That's one thing. The second thing is that because Mercury is going around the sun, it looks like it's going backwards when it comes between us and the sun. Therefore, Mercury is closer to Earth. Therefore, the mercurial communication, data interchange, traffic on the bridge is more intense than it normally is. So the danger of Mercury retrograde is not signing the contract. It's signing the contract in a state of high anxiety and not reading it. I mean, this is the significant thing. It's not that one shouldn't get married when Mercury is retrograde. It's just that one should pay attention to the details in advance and understand the nature of what's going on by taking the time. You don't want to go out when Mercury is retrograde, going over a planet, and your car gets a flat tire. You don't want to say, I've been meaning to get a new car forever. My tire's flat. I'm going to go out and look for a car this afternoon. I'm not going to buy anything. I'm just going to go look. The first place you walk into has a purple car, and you go, God, I love that color purple. I'll buy that car. That's what happens on a Mercury retrograde. We make stupid decisions because we don't take the time to process them. This false sense of urgency is a false sense of urgency.
I agree. Now let's talk about
too.
the signs a little bit. Mercury, when it goes retrograde, sometimes changes signs, and sometimes it spends the whole 23 or so days in the same sign. As Rick pointed out, Mercury, the planet of communication and perception, entered deep, intense Scorpio just a few days ago. That's kind of X-ray vision. The Mercury and Scorpio look at reality is that a cigar is never just a cigar. Everything always means something more, has a deeper level to it. On the one hand, we can call it perception and insight. On the other hand, we can call it paranoia. It really depends upon what your angle of perspective is. So what's happening is Mercury goes retrograde in Scorpio, a sign of a fixed water sign. Water is emotional, fixed signs are resistant, so it starts in a place where our minds can be locked into things with an emotional twist. Mercury backs up, it re-enters Libra on the 10th of October, and what that can offer in a positive sense is sort of stepping out of our emotional attachment to an idea, to a perception, and getting some of that airy Libran objectivity to review it and re-see it differently. Then, of course, Mercury turns around again on the 25th, goes back into Scorpio on November 8th. So normally we go from Libra to Scorpio, just as the sun, which never turns retrograde, does this month. Libra is, hi, how do you do? Let's make a partnership. Scorpio is, okay, let's sign the contract. Let's have sex. Let's merge. Libra is the beginning of relationship. Scorpio is the deeper, committed, engaged second phase of relationship. Intellectually, with Mercury backing out of Scorpio and going into Libra, it suggests that we can work in reverse order. If we've gone too far with an idea, with a commitment, with a concept, this is an excellent opportunity to go, wow, I can look at it differently, particularly when Mercury goes into Libra on the 10th, and add an element of objectivity to a perspective that is largely driven by subjective feelings.
So let's jump to the middle end of the month, around the 23rd, when we have the Sun moving toward the end of Libra, getting ready to move into the next sign, Scorpio, that Jeff just described. But look at this. Mercury has retrograded all the way back into the middle of Libra. By the way, this little gray headphone thingy is the north node of the moon. It describes the point at which the orbit of the moon around the Earth intersects the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. Those of you who know, and those of you who don't know don't need to know more, but we keep ignoring this little point here, but it's a mathematical...
It's also why we're having eclipses.
That's right.
Eclipses only occur when a new or full moon is within a half a sign or less of these crossing points.
Because it means they're all on the same plane. They're all on the same... So we have Mercury in Libra, and we already have Venus and the Sun in Libra, but look how close they are, and they're moving toward the end of Libra, getting ready to move into Scorpio. But like the sweep second hand, we have the moon moving into Libra, so we have the Sun and the moon and Mercury and Venus all in Libra for a short period of time, but the moon, which is gaining on the Sun toward the new moon, doesn't quite catch up with the Sun until the Sun tips just a couple of hours later into Scorpio, and then the moon, first Venus, and then the moon all move into Scorpio, and that's
the Sun.
And the first the Sun, then Venus, and then the moon, and we have the new moon at the very, 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 very first edge, the first degree of Scorpio. But it's like the moon is running to catch up to it, and it's almost like Mercury retrograde saying, I got a trick. You're not going to catch up to the Sun until it changes signs. Because it's all clustered. It's such a Libran energy the day before, and yet the new energy is in Scorpio.
Yeah, which is a new moon is the beginning of the monthly cycle. The Sun and the moon join together, and that's a time of conception. This is a time of conception in Scorpio, of deep fusion, of deep feelings, of desire, of passion, etc., and lovely Venus is along for the ride. Now here's an interesting contrast. The new moon, any new moon, is the beginning of a new cycle. And as Rick pointed out, it happens right in the beginning of Scorpio. So it's new Scorpio, new moon, and yet Scorpio feels like deep and old, and yet there's something fresh and young. It's fresh and young, but maybe randy, maybe full of desire. You've got that Scorpio kind of intensity, but it's like the junior high dance. You know, you've got all of this juicy stuff that's going on. It could also be like the young bankers who are out to make their first early deal. So we have a very interesting mix of the profundity of Scorpio, which is rarely thought of as naive, and yet a new moon or the beginning of any cycle has a degree of naivete associated with it.
And did we say that this new moon was an eclipse?
Yeah.
Is an eclipse. Yeah, so this is a new moon eclipse or a solar eclipse.
And
we're hanging on for a second.
Okay.
Are we changing or? Do 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 do. Do 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 do.
It's an old astrological vaudeville routine.
It's called the Mercury Shuffle.
Right. Or the Scorpio stomp. Or slide.
You know, you said that the Scorpio thing, we're not recording yet. You said that, you know, it goes from the meeting in Libra to either the contract or the sex or the intensity of, but it also could be like agreeing to kill someone.
If you'd like.
A different kind of contract.
Yeah. I hope that wasn't recorded.
No.
Well, I'll cut it out when I get home anyway. So. Now.
Streaming, better than streaming
that's
dead.
Right. Exactly. So,
all right, we're back.
At a lunar eclipse, which we have on the 8th of the month, the moon, symbolic of the past, even though it's in the speedy be here now sign of Aries, an eclipse of the moon is about letting go of the past. Some aspect of it. An eclipse of the sun is about stepping back into our feelings, because the sun is will. The sun is ego consciousness, yet the moon is feelings and reflection. So in a solar eclipse, it sort of represents that if you're willfully pushing things forward and are insensitive to the situation, to your own feelings, and to history, then you may not be successful. And solar eclipses are traditionally associated with the fall of heads of state.
Yeah, and it's because energy shifts, and it's the energy is what's apparent, what's out there.
And the sun's the king.
And the sun is the king, the sun is the center. And it's almost like, you know, to the ancients, if you can imagine, I mean, we know that an eclipse is coming, but it's like all of a sudden, it's like the sun goes out. This is like frightening. It shows the what's the word I'm looking for? The tenuous, the tenuousness of life, of nature, of things that have structure. And I think that this eclipse, because it's in Scorpio, the sign of death and rebirth and transformation and metamorphosis, I think it's a very, very, very powerful eclipse.
But with Venus so close, the goddess of love and beauty, and sexy Scorpio, it's like being bitten by a poison lady spider and loving it. You know, there is some kind of toxic, intoxicating seduction that is also part of this, and it might have to do with another person who's alluring but doesn't follow through, who winds up costing you more than you would expect, or an activity, but it could also be your own indulgent compulsions that wind up costing more than you might expect, unless you reflect upon it.
There's another thing that's happening as the new moon over the next few hours after the actual eclipse makes an aspect that then's followed by the sun and Venus, and that is we have nebulous Neptune in early degrees of watery Pisces, and just 8 hours after the eclipse, the moon makes a trine to Neptune, followed by the sun and Venus on I think the last day of the month, on the 27th and 28th. And this, I think, in some ways heightens the sense of fantasy and illusion and dreams around the possibility. This is a real energetic change point, I think, for us.
Yeah, and the sun and Venus make their exact conjunction on the 25th of October, the same day Mercury turns direct. And you know, a good Sun-Venus conjunction in Scorpio is like a great, deep, rich chocolate dessert. It's beyond sweet. It's sweet with a little something devilish in it, something that moves us in a level that's not childlike, but represents a mature taste of pleasure. So it's pretty sexy, sassy time.
Right, and you can see as we move to the end of the month the thickness of this blue line between Venus and the Sun, and even though they're exactly conjunct on the 25th, they're moving at a fairly similar speed, so they stay very close for several days. And I agree with Jeff completely. This is really delicious. It's the delicious side of the devil. or the devilish side of delicious. Either
Well,
way.
yeah, and another way to put that then is to find value in things that are emotionally deep and true, even if they're not entirely comfortable. You know, you can be lustful and not act upon it and enjoy the process without complicating your life. There are ways to enjoy the pleasures in scorpionic secrecy and silence sometimes, which can be satisfying, but again, quite subtle and indirect.
So in a month where there are 2 eclipses, a lunar eclipse, full moon, and a solar eclipse, new moon, in a month where this T-square, the square between Uranus and Pluto, is triggered by the Sun and by Venus, and in a month where we have this wonderful fiery trine energy that's lingering from last week's Uranus-Jupiter trine that Mars moves through and really energizes and opens up the fiery intensity of the passion of the mind, that this is really an exciting period of time. But it's important coming through the month and then moving into the scorpionic period where the energies really deepen. It's important to keep perspective. It's important to know, to pay attention to when things are happening in your life. Which side are you on? Are you on the fiery grand trine side, or are you on the intense conflict of the trying to get that rational objective state and hold it in spite of getting hooked, you know, by the squares or the oppositions to Uranus and or Pluto?
Yeah, it's almost as if all neighborhoods, all attitudes, all thoughts and behavior are safe if you know where you are externally in terms of the environment, and internally where you are mentally and emotionally. So have a great month.
Have a great month,
Rick.
Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, group. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to come back here and take a look at 3 of your charts.
And remember, if you'd like us to possibly draw your chart, put your name. You can put both your whole name, but at least your first name, your birth date, place, and time on a piece of paper. Bigger is not better. Although a $100 bill clipped to it might improve your chances of getting picked. Yeah, it's an expediter. And include your email on there. That way we'll put you on our mailing list and keep you informed of things that we do here and around town. We'll see you all in about 15 minutes. And remember, this is a function of Soul Food Coffee House. It's free. Jeff and I donate our time. But the way you get to keep this going is to vote with your money by buying shit. So if you have some elegantly put. So if you have some gift, birthday gift, something that you were looking at buying this month, rather than buying it at the big brand name department store down the block, spend your money here and basically do good, vote economically. Thank you. Thank you. Who's behind the counter? Tyler and Aaron, and Kevin's floating around also. Thank you all, and we'll see you in a bit.